Good morning and welcome to our event, Fast Track to Affordable, Secure and Sustainable Energy, the Green Deal to boost renewable energy and efficiency. So a real welcome to our members of Parliament on stage, and welcome to all the participants in the room and online. The EU Sustainable Energy Week is a huge outreach event, and I'm really glad to see so many people here today. I'm Ciarán Cuff, President of Euphores, and Euphores is unique in that it is a cross-party organisation which provides an excellent platform in the European Parliament and allows us to be part of a network that means we get close collaboration with national members of Parliament and indeed within the European Parliament itself. We are the European Union Forum for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And the time has come. We've been waiting in the wings for a long time, but really the explosion of interest in the European Green Deal in renewable energy has really put this into the spotlight, and we are pleased with the progress that we are seeing. And for us in Euphores, our goal is clear. Boost the uptake of renewables and energy efficiency throughout the European Union. And as many of you are surely aware, in 2019, the European Union made history by committing itself to the goal of climate neutrality by 2050 through the European Green Deal. And as policymakers, this will be, I think, the defining challenge of our time. And I was just saying to a colleague, despite the challenge of the global pandemic, despite the challenge of Putin's war in Ukraine, the European Green Deal still remains as a hugely important objective for all the citizens of the European Union and for ourselves as policy makers. And we believe it will ensure our children's future as well as the future of our planet. But this won't be easy. Between now and 2050, we hope to see our economy, our energy sources, and even our society transition away from fossil fuels towards a cleaner and renewable future. In the European Parliament, the year 2022 will see the revision of some hugely important legislation on EU level that will ensure the Green Deal becomes a reality across Europe. This is, of course, the Fit for 55 package, and it involves about 20 separate pieces of legislation that are finding their way through the Parliament and through the European institutions. It includes a revision of legislation such as the Energy Efficiency Directive, and we've Niels Fuglsang in the room with us, the Parliament's rapporteur on that, the Renewable Energy Directive, and others. And these will lay the tracks that will bring the EU towards its 2030 climate targets and lay the foundation for the 2050 climate neutral goal. As well as this, of course, matters in the Ukraine have given the status quo a shake, and we need to ensure that we keep the lights on as well as ensure the energy transition. So you are very welcome to this event, which I think brings some hugely important speakers into the room who are at the heart of how this deal will happen. So the cutting off of Europe's gas supply in recent months has demonstrated to us that the only way forward is the move towards renewable energy and energy efficiency. So we have the impetus to wean ourselves off Russian fossil fuel and make the switch to a sustainable and clean energy source. Furthermore, investing in renewables and energy efficiency will help us combat the rising energy bills that we're seeing as a result of our reliance on fossil fuels. We're seeing extraordinary volatility in fossil energy prices, and we're not seeing that with clean and green energy sources. So I, along with many of my Euphores colleagues, will be fighting in the European Parliament to ensure that our ambition helps us to reach these goals sooner rather than later. And today is part of that conversation, an exchange amongst legislators from different political groups and parliaments, from European Parliament to national, with input by from the European Union Commission. So, in terms of housekeeping today, we will take questions from participants in the Slido tool, which I'm sure you've encountered in other conferences. So I'd ask the audience in the room and online to make use of it. and I will tell you a little bit more about that as we go along. We'll try and answer your questions at the end of this session. But let's kick things off with Hans Vonstein from the European Commission. Hans is the Principal Advisor for an integrated renewable energy strategy towards the 2050 carbon neutrality objective with DG Energy. He is a long-standing expert and Commission official on renewables and efficiency, amongst others, and he was head of unit of renewable energy in DG Energy. So he's been a long-standing friend of Euphores over the years, travelling and speaking in national parliaments. So it is a real pleasure to welcome Hans to the podium. Hans, or perhaps you'd speak from where you are, whatever you're comfortable with.
Thank you very much, Kieran. I'm very happy to speak from here, if that's okay with everyone. So thank you very much, Kieran, for those very nice words. Thank you to Euphores for having me on this very esteemed lineup here today, which looks like a very interesting event. I hope my voice will last throughout my keynote speech, because it's not, perhaps as you can hear, its normal self, but I'll do my very best. So I think it's, first of all, very, very nice to have the Sustainable Energy Week back in an in-person mode. I think after a couple of years online, it is really, really nice to be able to see people and to have all the other interactions that you have during days like this. And I think that's a real good thing. And it couldn't really come at a better time, because I think the pressure on energy right now is as big as it has ever been. In reality, in our view from the Commission, we are facing a triple challenge on energy. First of all, and perhaps most importantly and fundamentally, we of course have the climate crisis. As you all know, 75% of our emissions come from energy. This summer has again shown that climate change is happening, and all the experts say that to avoid catastrophic climate change, we need really to act now, and we need to act decisively. The second challenge that we are facing is security of supply. For the first time really in 50 years, I think, we are facing a situation where we are looking into a winter with some uncertainty in terms of security of supply. The war in Ukraine has shown that Europe has become dangerously vulnerable, and I think we now have 13 member states that have had their gas supplies either fully or partially shut off, and we could face even more serious situations as we move forward. That's why we need also to devote significant attention to that particular problem. And thirdly, affordability. We have really seen energy prices shoot up. I don't need to tell you that. Everybody who pays their bills will have seen that. It drives the short-term agenda of energy policy, both at the national level and at the European level, for good reasons, because I think that is, for many people, the first thing that is on their mind. Will we be able to pay our bills in the very short term? All of this, in our view from the Commission side, calls for extraordinary action. And you will have seen a lot of extraordinary measures put forward by the Commission in recent months, also some at national level. But in our view, it is really, really important to understand that the only two things that can seriously address these triple challenges in the long term is to speed up the energy transition with more energy efficiency and more renewable energy. And that is why, in our view, that the Green Deal agenda is more important now than ever. This is why the Fit for 55 package is so important, and we need to see fast progress towards adoption of that multitude of measures that were proposed in that package. And important here maybe just to recall that the Green Deal and the Fit for 55 is not just about climate change. It is also Europe's growth strategy. So from an economic point of view, and after COVID and all that, it is really important to get going. And I'm very happy that we have two of the rapporteurs for two important proposals in that package, Niels and Kieran, with us here today. because we are seeing good progress. We are content in the Commission with the progress that is being done, but we need now that to be followed through in the trilogues that will start in the very, very near future. It's very clear that renewables and energy efficiency can help us reduce emissions. This goes without saying. But also security of supply and affordability are challenges that can be addressed through energy efficiency and renewables. In fact, if you start to think about it, energy efficiency especially is something that can bring real immediate effects to our challenge on security of supply, because when you reduce the energy use, you get instant relief. You, first of all, don't need to import this energy that you are saving, and you don't need to pay for it. So it immediately helps you with both security of supply and affordability. Equally, renewables is a key measure also on that front. We need, though, to make real progress, for example, when it comes to the permitting procedures for renewables, which are far too long. It takes simply too long to get renewable projects going. If we want to have something immediately, maybe not for this winter, but for the following winter, and I think we are now looking into a situation where many of the challenges will stay for some time, we need really to make progress on that, and that's why the Commission has made proposals for seriously addressing the whole issue of permitting procedures on renewables. If we look back for a moment to the time when we proposed the Green Deal, so this was, of course, before COVID, it was before the skyrocketing energy prices, it was before Mr. Putin's war of aggression in Ukraine, but all of these events underline the need to accelerate the energy transition. And from the Commission side, we have made a number of tools available for doing exactly that. To start with, we put forward the Recovery and Resilience Facility, an economic instrument to speed up economic recovery after COVID, billions of euros available to member states, including on energy efficiency and renewables. Many, if not most member states have made good use of this money, but we still think more can be done, and that's why we have recently asked member states, in the light of the new energy challenges, to revisit the plans that they have drawn up in this framework to see if even more can be done. We're also making more money available, and we are pointing to the fact that not the entire financial envelope for the Recovery and Resilience Facility was used in the first round. To specifically address the dramatic price increases, the Commission outlined in a so-called toolbox measures which member states could take to alleviate the worst consequences for both households and businesses. That was in the autumn of last year, but I think it's now clear that that was not enough. Prices kept increasing, including due to the war in the Ukraine. And that, among other things, was the reason why we came forward with the REPowerEU in May of this year. And here we propose a number of important actions to end dependency of Russian fossil fuels, and thereby also addressing some of the issues related to affordability. First of all, there was a very specific communication on energy savings, EUSEW as it was called. There was a whole range of issues in terms of diversifying supplies away from Russian fossil fuels, new types of gas, including hydrogen, but also to look at new suppliers in other parts of the world which are more dependable. We also said to member states, and that has subsequently been enshrined in legislation, to fill up gas storages, and that is a real success story because we now have storages more than 80% filled in the EU. And then we proposed new targets for renewables and energy efficiency as a part of REPowerEU to increase energy efficiency target from 9 to 13%, and with renewables target from 40 to 45%, and that is by 2030. Hugely ambitious, we are well aware of that, but nonetheless necessary in the current situation. We've also, after REPowerEU, followed up with the so-called Article 122 emergency measures to save gas for a safe winter, as it is called, a legal proposal that was rapidly adopted for member states to instigate savings of gas by 15% during this winter. And even more recently, we have proposed the EU emergency intervention to reduce electricity bills, including a proposal to reduce energy demand, or electricity demand, sorry, by 10% overall and by 5% during peak hours, also in the immediate future. These are all very important proposals to cap, there are also very important measures to cap revenues on low-cost power generators and to use the revenues therefrom to reduce the burdens on energy consumers. And it also includes a so-called solidarity contribution to be paid by fossil fuel companies, also to bring down bills. All of this is currently being discussed, and we hope that agreement can be found maybe on some of these things already at the Extraordinary Energy Council at the end of this week. However, it is important to underline that these are emergency measures based on Article 122. This is not the normal way of making EU legislation, and all of these measures are by definition temporary. In the long term, and that's really my main message here today, the only thing that will really bring us forward and avoid crises like the one that we are currently facing on energy is to move down the energy transition rapidly and decisively. That is why the Green Deal remains, as I said, more important than ever. That's why the Fit for 55 package remains the main piece of legislative initiatives that will have to take us forward. I will stop there, and I very much look forward to hear from the other members of the panel. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy that my voice more or less didn't give up on me halfway. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you for that contribution. I think really what we're seeing is a crisis evolving in real time, and Europe has had to respond, and respond it did. And we're watching as we move towards this Energy Council. We saw over the last 24 hours a leak in the Nord Stream pipeline. And I think what we're witnessing are geopolitical events that are changing the course of history between the European Union and Russia. And as you said, Hans, we have to not just deal with the immediate events as they happen, but look at the long-term picture, and the transition is crucial to all of that. One guy who knows all about that transition is my friend and colleague, Niels Fuglsang. Niels, sitting beside Hans, has been an MEP since 2019, like myself. He's from Denmark, and he is the rapporteur on the Energy Efficiency Directive. He is part of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats within the European Parliament, and he serves on both the Committee on Employment and Social Affairs and the Committee on Industry, Research and Energy. And he is currently the rapporteur or lead negotiator on the revisions to the Energy Efficiency Directive. In addition to his committee assignments, Niels is part of the Parliament's delegation for relations with China, and he's a member of the European Parliament Intergroup on welfare and the conservation of animals. So I would like to invite Niels to give an overview on the debate that he is part of within the European Parliament. Niels, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kieran. Thank you for the nice words. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this debate at a very crucial time, being the second Dane here in the panel, along with Hans. I agree very much with the analysis launched by Hans a minute ago, and I will try to give you an overview from my point of view of what is going on in the European Parliament when we look at how we can solve this crisis that we face. I believe that it is, well, I think we all know that this is incredibly serious, the crisis that we face, the multiple crises of climate change, security of supply, soaring prices, also security when it comes to Russia's war in Ukraine. So there are lots of challenges facing us, and we just had a discussion here before we went on here on the stage that, at least in my lifetime, I think this is the most serious crisis that I have seen, and I really think we need to take some. It is incredibly important that we take the right decisions. I think, being a political scientist, we often talk about the crisis. This is what, in a time of crisis, this is when things change, when we have opportunities to take decisions to fundamentally change our systems. But it can go in different directions, and the script is certainly not written yet. So we have an opportunity now and an obligation to really take the right decisions. I think when I look at the European Parliament and what is going on with the discussion in the EU and in the European Parliament in particular, I see 4 possible responses to the crisis that we face. I think we should go for the number 4, the last one, but I will just try to tell you what I see as number 1, 2, 3, and 4. First, there are those who say that we need to cut down or be less ambitious when it comes to our climate targets. We should allow for drilling more oil and gas in the European Union, and we should also make as many deals as we can with countries, dictators around the world, to get access to oil and gas from these regimes. In my own country, Denmark, we have planned to phase out the oil drillings in the Northern Sea and to stop new auctions for oil drillings. And there are voices now saying that maybe that was a little bit too fast that we made those decisions. Maybe we should actually continue the drilling and continue new oil drilling projects. And I think that is a debate in Denmark, but as far as I can hear, it's a debate in several member states and in the European Parliament, that we should actually do more to get fossil fuels and drill more for oil and gas. That is, of course, not in line with our Green Deal, not in line with our climate targets. We all experienced the summer this year, as Hans mentioned a minute ago. I think we cannot afford to expand extraction of fossil fuels. But that is part of the debate. Second, there are those who say that nuclear, and I'll be interested in hearing what the panel says in a minute, but that nuclear power will be the solution. That, we should have built many more nuclear plants years ago, but at least we have to really invest in a lot of nuclear right now and build new nuclear power plants. The only problem, there are several problems, but a major problem as far as I'm concerned is that it takes too long time. The last 3 projects we have in Europe, in the UK, France, and Finland, well, they are more than 15 years from the first shovel hit the ground till they produce power, and we don't have that much time, basically. So I think that that's far-fetched, but there will be disagreement about that, and that's part of the debate. We just had a discussion we took a decision on the taxonomy in the European Parliament, deciding what can count as a green investment and what cannot count, and nuclear was decided to count under certain circumstances as green investments by the European Parliament. Third, there are those who say, and they become stronger as far as I can hear, there are those who say that we went too far in the European Union when it comes to sanctions against Russia, that we should step back. Viktor Orban just had a speech, I think, yesterday, saying that the EU went too far, and the rising prices, well, they're caused by our sanctions, and we should basically drop the sanctions, or at least ease the sanctions. There are several problems with that. First of all, we have a moral obligation to react. I hope that we agree on this. Second of all, when we're talking about gas, it's not our sanctions, it's Putin who turned down the gas volumes, so it's his actions. We didn't make sanctions against gas, we made sanctions against coal and oil. The fourth option, which is the one I go for, and I am very happy to hear, and I also know that the Commission stands firm on this position, is that the only solution to this crisis in the long term is to increase and massively invest in renewables and energy efficiency. That we get a green transition, that we speed up this green transition so that we can become independent of both Putin but also other dictators that we might become dependent on if we start importing gas and oil from other countries. This is in line with our climate targets, because as we have to remember, we have several crises going on at the same time, and as far as I'm concerned, the climate crisis is the largest crisis of our time. So I think we need to do that, and as far as I can hear, I mean, the European Commission is clear on this. As far as I can hear and understand, the European Parliament, that is still, luckily, the strongest position in the European Parliament that a majority stands firm on. And we need to make sure that that is still the case if we look months ahead, if we look years ahead. That is our biggest task, as far as I can see. And I think when we look at the directives that we're negotiating now, mainly, I mean, the whole Fit for 55 package, but if we look at the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive, last one I'm leading the negotiations myself, I think we've proven that we stand on this position as the European Parliament. We raised the targets for renewable energy in line with the Commission's proposal in the REPowerEU from 40 to 45% for 2030. We also say that we need to strengthen the requirements for biomass, that not everything can count as renewables. We need to make sure that it is actually sustainable, what we do. And so we exclude biomass which is not sustainable. And I think this shows that we are serious about this. We're also right now negotiating a new proposal from the European Commission about permitting. This is one of the most the largest problems when it comes to rolling out renewables, that it takes so long time to get permits for putting up new wind turbines, and we need to speed up those processes. And that is a trade-off between, let's be honest, that is sometimes a trade-off between nature considerations, environmental considerations, and speeding up of renewables to do something good for the climate and to become independent of Putin. And I think we need to find a balance where we, of course, still take into account nature, but it has to be faster. We cannot allow projects to be blocked for years and years. Lastly, I would say, when it comes to the Energy Efficiency Directive, that's the one I'm negotiating myself. We agree with the Commission's proposal that we should increase the targets for energy efficiency. Actually, we go beyond the Commission. In the European Parliament, we go beyond the Commission's proposal. The Commission originally proposed 9%, a 9% target for energy efficiency when it comes to final energy consumption. Then later they came with the REPowerEU plan after the war started and said that in light of current events, that is not ambitious enough, so we raised it to 13%, from 9 to 13%. In the European Parliament 2 weeks ago, we adopted a target of 14.5%. We say that it should be obligatory, I mean it should be binding targets for the European Union as such, but also for each member state, that each member state needs to have a target, individual target that they need to live up to, and they cannot say it's the other countries that need to do more. All member states have to increase energy efficiency. So I think we stand on this conviction that energy efficiency and renewables are the only tools in the long term that will lead us out of this crisis. And as I said, this is incredibly serious because we can do something in the short term. Ursula von der Leyen has proposed price caps, taxing windfall profit, redistributing some of the profits that are made. That I support those measures, but they're not long-term. They're not long-term solutions, of course. The long-term solutions are renewable and energy efficiency, but we cannot do that tomorrow. That will take some years. We need to speed it up as much as we can, but it will take some years, and that's why we need to also in the short term figure out how we cannot avoid this crisis. We didn't invest enough in the past, but we can try to make sure, that's also the socialist speaking here, that we that we redistribute to say those who have the highest profits. Well, we need to make sure that the vulnerable groups don't pay the largest bill, because then we will have an ethical problem. We will also have social unrest. It will become very serious. So I think that's what we need to do. Yes, I think that would be the words from me right now. I also say to Kieran, our host here, that he has a big job ahead of him when it comes to the negotiations on the EPBD, the Buildings Directive. Incredibly important for the energy efficiency agenda. We know that 40% of our energy comes from buildings. So Kieran, we also count on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Niels. No pressure. I appreciate the handover to ensuring that buildings play their fair share in the energy transition. Thank you, Hans, and thank you, Niels. I think those two contributions really kick things off very well. But I want to just now briefly introduce our panelists, and what we want to do over the next half hour or so is really discuss what's happening at national level and then take different perspectives on what we see happening within the European Union. At the far end of the panel, we have Maria de Graça Carvalho, who is an MEP from Portugal with the European People's Party. Maria is a Portuguese academic, engineer and politician who has served several terms in the European Parliament, but also she is a member of the Industry, Research and Energy Committee and was the rapporteur on the Horizon 2020 research framework. She certainly brings a strong evidence-based approach to her work. We also have in the panel Cristina Madalina Pruna, an MP from Romania. She is a deputy for Bucharest, and she's an economist by profession, a member of the Committee on Industries and Services, and during her parliamentary term she co-initiated and proposed projects to get rid of bureaucracy and make business life easier, and several of these have become laws, which is great to hear. And then from closer to where we are now, we have Kim Buist, who is an MP for Belgium with the Flemish Greens. She tells me she comes from a small village near Antwerp, and I heard someone say to her earlier that she had good English, and she said, thank you, but she had taught English, I think, for 19 years, so always nice when that is appreciated. But Kim, you have said that the task of our generation is crystal clear. For a fair and equal society, we must keep our climate livable, and I think that is a good point to remember in all of our discussions when we worry about economics, we worry about social impacts, but we do need to have a livable planet. And then online, we have Sara Sofia Siren, who is an MP from Finland, and she is with us, I think, on screen. She is from the National Coalition Party at the Finland, of the Finland proper constituency. And she organized the last physical Euphores interparliamentary party meeting in 2019 in the Finnish Parliament. So we're honored to have her online. But maybe, Maria, from your perspective, Oh, and we are also joined by Nicolas Cazares. Your timing is impeccable, I have to say, Nicolas. It's great to have you with us. A Spanish politician, member of the European Parliament since 2019, and Nicolas serves also on the Energy Committee and the Special Committee on Beating Cancer. And you are part of the Parliament's delegation for relations with Japan, and you're a member of the Spinelli Group. So, Nicolas, good to have you with us. But Maria, maybe a perspective from where you are in Portugal, but more importantly within the European People's Party, on how we can make this transition happen and happen in a timely manner.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and congratulations to Euphores to organize this panel. Very timely, very important topic for Europe and for all the member states. So, as it was said, I'm a member of the EPP, and I'm in the Energy and Industry Committee, and I'm an engineer and a professor on energy in the University of Lisbon. I'm not teaching now, but it was my profession for many years. So the first EPP is very committed to the green transition, and we defend clean energy, available, affordable for all. And at the same time that we think that there is a big effort for regulation targets, EPP also defends that we need to have a similar effort on the research, innovation, and technological development. And this will help us to, in a way, the people, the citizens, and the companies, the industry, to do the transition and to continue, for people to continue with some comfort and some not to change drastically the way of living, and for the companies to continue competitive while doing the transition. And what we mean by this, we mean that we need to have, instead of stopping mobility, we need to have means of mobility that are cleaner and affordable, that are ways that the industry, for example, energy-intensive industry, is less impact on the environment. And we still do not have all the technological solutions. We have some, fortunately, because for the past 30 years we have invested a lot on research and innovation, but we still do not have all the technological solutions for all the sectors, special aviation, road long distance, and some of the energy sectors. We still need to do more research, innovation, pilot scale demonstration. And it's one of the reasons that we put a lot as a group, as a political group, a lot of emphasis on the funding, the investment on research, on the Horizon Europe, on the public-private partnerships inside Horizon Europe. I was fortunate to be the rapporteur of the 11 partnerships, where we include the clean hydrogen, the bio-based partnership, the clean aviation, the European rail, so, and all were devoted to clean solutions for these sectors. We also believe that we should cut the unnecessary burden on that will allow us or easy the life of the companies, especially the SMEs, in this transition, because at the same time they are doing the clean transition and the digital transition. They help each other, these two transitions, but we should not impose unnecessary burden and unnecessary costs of compliance to make life easy for our companies. We have been very active and part of the deals. We are very happy. We are part of the agreement, for example, on the energy efficiency, and we have the main rapporteur on the revision on the energy, the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive. That was Mr. Colleague of us, Mr. Markus Pieper, where There was also a very broad agreement that he managed with the shadows rapporteurs, where we increased the, as it was already said by Niels, we increased the ambitions of renewables from the proposal of the Commission 40% to 45. Very important, sometimes we don't speak, but we have a target, a sub-target for the innovative renewables of 5%. This is very important because we cannot forget the other renewables that can probably play an important role in the future, like the wave energy, tidal energy, geothermal, other forms of energy that of renewable energy that can be maybe very important in the future. We also put a lot of effort on the hydrogen. We have very ambitious targets for hydrogen. For example, the use of hydrogen in Europe, in industry, must be 50% from renewables in 2030 and 70% in 2035. This is a major effort, and very good, I find it good, very balanced agreement was found for the biomass. We still, in spite of all the discussions about the sustainability of biomass, we really need the use of biomass as non-intermittent forms of renewables, and is an important part of the energy mix in a lot of countries, like my own in Portugal. Speaking very shortly about Portugal, we are one of the countries that now have suffered less with the situation of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because we are in certain way far away. That has a lot of disadvantage, but in this case was an advantage. We don't import a lot of gas from Russia. Usually we import 2%. The last year before the war we import more 10%, because we have as a base load the hydropower, and on top of all the problems that we have now, we have a lack of water because it's not raining. So our reserves of water are very low, and this is one of the reasons that we have import more, but it's only about 10%. But this is already correct because there is other diversification. So we have a very high percentage of renewables. We continue, as all European countries, almost all European countries, to need some transition in the transition periods from some gas, but we have a lot of diversification because we have a pipeline together with Spain that comes from the north of Africa, from Algeria, and we also have LNG. Iberian Peninsula altogether, we have 9 LNG ports, but we cannot help a lot the rest of Europe because there is no interconnections between Iberian Peninsula and enough interconnections between Iberian Peninsula and France. And I'm sorry to say that for the French that are here, because France wants to protect their nuclear power, so they never had allowed this construction. I remember I was in government from 2002 to 2005, and somewhere in 2003 we signed the first agreement to build this pipeline between Portugal, Spain, and France, with the prime ministers. And so this ceremony, with a lot of visibility, has repeated itself about 7 times, but it was never built. So we should invest on renewables, on energy efficiency, but we need some gas for the transition, but we need to have a diversification of this gas, of origin, countries of origin, countries of transit, and not to depend on one unreliable supplier like we did in the past. It was a mistake. It was already said that diversification is key in our first energy strategy that was launched in 2008 by the European Union, and but we didn't went through that line, and we have bet, I'm finishing, we bet on the Russian gas. That was a mistake. So now we have to correct, but I think we are in the good track for that. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. That's really, really useful words. I think one of the takeaways from what you're saying, two of the takeaways, one is that local politics or local geopolitics has a role to play in the energy transition, but also it takes time. It takes time to bring in new technologies and to get them to market. And this is one of the challenges that we face over the coming years. And there is always tensions between the Iberian Peninsula and France. But I wonder if Sara Sofia Siren is with us online, because she is there in Finland dealing with tensions of another order with a neighbor, Russia, with a very long border there. And Sara, if you're with us, you hosted the Euphores gathering in Finland 3 years ago. The world has changed since then, most obviously with Russia's aggression in Ukraine. But from a Finnish perspective, and as an MEP representing Finland, unlike Maria, you don't have as much sunshine as Portugal. You don't have as much wind or wave energy. So maybe some perspectives from the Nordic corner as to the energy transition.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am here, and I'm really honored and happy to be participating on this very timely, important and interesting event. I'm really sorry I unfortunately was not able to attend present, which was the original plan, but luckily we are all quite used to these remote possibilities, and I'm happy to participate at least online. Yes, it was my honor to have you in Helsinki 3 years back, and we were talking at the Euphores conference about the very same topics on energy and on the transition that we need to do. But like you said, since then, a lot has changed in the world. Even though we have these new crises, we had the pandemic, now we have the war in Europe, the basic crisis that we already had and have had for quite some time, the climate crisis has not disappeared anywhere. So it's as important as ever to us to find solutions to make this transition happen. At the same time, I think it's very important to say out loud that the climate policy was not a reason for the energy crisis that Europe is facing at the moment. We have some of discussion on this in Europe, and we have heard it also in Finland. But I'm quite sure that the participants of this event understand that the climate policy was not the reason for the energy crisis, but climate policy can be a big part of the solution. It can be, it is as important as ever to make sure that we have the expansion of renewable energy production in Europe, because we do not want to be dependent on fossil fuels, especially fossil fuels from Russia. So if anything, the war has made it clearer that this transition needs to be happening, and it needs to happen faster than what we originally planned. So this is not the time to weaken any of the climate targets that we have set. And this is also not the time to weaken any of the sanctions that we have against Russia. Quite the contrary. this is the time that the European Union needs to be united, and we need to work together for these common goals that are vital for our security and the well-being of European citizens in all member states. The crisis that we are facing at the moment has a short-term perspective and then a longer-term perspective, as I see it. In Finland, particularly, the short-term crisis is mainly on the price of electricity. Like we all know, the member states have very different situations regarding their energy production and their energy consumption. And in Finland, the question on gas is not that important because we are not that dependent on gas as some other member states. But the energy prices are, I'd say, the biggest debate and the biggest challenge that the government and the parliament is facing on a national level at this time. So on a short term, the main focus is to get through next winter. You know, winters in Finland can be very cold, and the electricity bills can be very high because people need to heat their houses on a cold winter days. On a longer perspective, we need to make sure that we have sustainable production in Europe. And for this, we can also use some of the productions that take longer, like nuclear power that was mentioned. We should not rule it out because it is a sustainable way for energy production. It's not a short-term solution, but on the long term, it is definitely something that we need on the palette. We also, of course, need more wind and solar power, and especially wind is something that we have a lot of potential here in Finland. I think Finland is one of the countries in Europe that has most potential when it comes to wind power, increasing the amount of wind power. We are also discussing hydrogen, green hydrogen in Finland. It is seen also a big potential for the longer term solutions that we need to have. On a European level, I think Finland is looking to have a strategic and a coordinated approach, and we are looking forward to having more cooperation also on this crisis. Hopefully, the crisis will bind us stronger together, and we'll have a mutual view on how to become a sustainable European Union when it comes to energy production in the future. So it is, and I hope that we all see it as a mutual goal to get undependent on Russian fossil fuels as fast as possible. But the main message from Finland at the moment would be not to weaken any of the targets that we have, and not to weaken any of the sanctions that we have towards Russia. Actually, the contrary, we need more and stronger sanctions to really show support to Ukraine and show Russia that we will not be dependent on them anymore.
Thank you, Sarah Sophia. I think those words of stronger together resonate across the European Union. Perhaps I'd go to Bucharest now, to Christina. Romania has been hugely challenged by war in Ukraine. You've managed a huge influx of Ukrainians fleeing their homeland for safety. But the debate about energy must be an important one currently in Romania. So how have the last 9 months shifted the dial in Romania? And from the perspective of Bucharest, what are you looking at in terms of renewables and energy efficiency?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kieran. I'm very happy to be here and to bring the Romanian perspective. We are living a crisis. It's not only the war that we have at our borders, but also it's the energy crisis that started not when the war started. It started last year. We all remember that governments and countries had huge challenges to respond to this crisis, and of course Romania was one of them. But I want to start with the European debate here, because we are now in a moment where we should make decisions as a European Union. And these decisions will really impact the future of our energy market and the future of our economies. And as it was said here before, and Maria said it very well, we made some mistakes in the European Union, and we became very dependent on Russian gas. It was somewhere at 40%, and all of a sudden we had to bring this dependency down because of this war and of the number of Ukrainians that are fighting against Russia, and they are fleeing their homes. So we should not make the same mistakes now. And for this, we need to understand that this crisis that we are facing now, and now I'm speaking as an economist, is a problem that we have with the supply and the demand. And the price is only a messenger that tells us that we have a scarcity in energy production, we have a scarcity in gas supply and gas production, and this is why our citizens, our households are facing these huge bills, and also our industry. Because I have to say, I don't see a lot of debate on the impact that the industry is facing, and the huge energy consumers are facing huge bills, and some of them, they had to close down. And beyond this big companies, there are people that are having jobs and people that are losing their jobs, and we really need to understand this and understand that our economies are at stake, and that the industry should also be protected. Of course, household consumers should be protected, and I've seen there's a debate everywhere. I was walking in the streets here in Belgium, and people are talking about their huge bills, but we also need to think about the economy. So even if we take short-term measures, and this is what we took in Bucharest, I'm from an opposition party, I don't like the measures that were taken. I think we should have taken more measures that also were recommended in that toolbox from the Commission last year. But this is our only temporary measures, very short-term measures. And what we need to do is to think long-term, and there are three words that should be on the agenda of every government. It's investments, investments, investments. If we don't invest in energy production, then this crisis will not be over. And we really need to understand this. We can cap profits, we can do whatever we can do at national level. This crisis will not stop if we don't invest in energy production. So here, of course, we have the renewables that are very close to us. So we like them. Yes, there are problems with the permitting. It takes about 2 years, at least in Romania, from what I discussed with the industry, to invest in this kind of energy production capacities. Also, I initiated a bill together with other colleagues to have offshore wind in the Black Sea. But also this is a long-term investment. I've been recently in the UK. It took about 10 to 11 years to have their offshore wind capacities installed, so it's a long-term investment. And there will be problems with the permitting as well, the wildlife in the sea, so it will take a lot of time. Then, of course, energy efficiency is very important. Again, we should talk also, besides public buildings and households, energy efficiency in the industry. We need to support as much as possible the industry to be more efficient in energy consumption. Also, maybe build their own capacities, renewable capacities to become prosumers, you know. But I also want to talk about, I will call it the elephant in the room, because I come from Romania. And Romania is a gas producer still. We are the second in the EU. And we still want to produce that natural gas because we see that we are still dependent. We are trying to diversify our sources of gas, but we still have national resources here in Europe. And as much as we love the renewables now, because they are clean, we still need natural gas to make this transition. And also to balance the system, because RES alone, they are intermittent and they cannot provide our energy security. And we also seen the drought this summer that made the prices even worse. So I think we should not ignore our gas resources and continue to exploit our resources to support this transition. Also, second of all, going into renewables, which is a great thing and I support, makes us also dependent on other economies. Asia, we import about 80 to 90% of all the components in the solar, in the wind turbines from Asia and other economies. So we need to see how we deal with this. And also, besides all this, we need to not forget about the market. The market that is one of the pillars of the European Union, and we need to pay attention to the measures that we take so that we don't destroy the energy market and the markets in general, because it will take a lot of time for the investors to gain trust again and to want to risk their money and to invest in energy production and all that. So really, if the measures we take now, they are destroying the market, I think this is not a good path. I just want to say a quick word on nuclear, and then very quickly, because Niels raised this question. So again, the Romanian perspective is that we need nuclear power. It's clean energy. I totally agree with you that it takes a lot of time to build these nuclear reactors, but we also have new technology of small modular reactors. And in Romania, we are looking into building this kind of capacities. It's about 80 megawatt per capacity, and you can build several of them. We have an agreement with the US, and this is one of the points. So just to conclude, yes, we need to make decisions now that should make us more resilient, and we need to pay attention that we don't become prisoners of the decisions we are taking these days. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina. I mean, it really is a challenge. It is a trilemma of tackling climate, dealing with the issue of cost for consumers, and then, of course, the issue of supply to keep the lights on and the heat on this winter. So it's not easy. And I think that point you made about supply chains for renewables, we are dependent on global supply chains, and I think that has certainly been in the news over the last 12 months, and it's something that has to be addressed. The CHIPS Act is part of that process here in the European Union, but clearly more action is needed. Nicolas, from a Spanish perspective, the Spanish government has been very proactive in controlling prices for the consumer in the short term, but in the long term, we need to reform the electricity market, the gas market, and align these prices with the transition. From your perspective, both as coming from Spain, but also as a member of the European Parliament, where do you see the situation now in autumn of 2022?
Thank you, Karen, and also thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. First, let me mention this issue of the prices and the problems we are facing now with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the skyrocketing prices of electricity and energy prices. First, I want to mention that, yes, we found a solution for Portugal and Spain that is called the Iberian exception for the electricity prices, for the spot electricity prices, but I think it's a short, medium-term measure that could no longer for a long time, that helps citizens to reduce their bills. But I think that we have a problem with the electricity market in Europe, and we should reform this market. Let me be clear. This market is not giving good signals when it comes to renewables, because the most we bet in renewables, people are suffering higher prices. And they think that it's also, why are we investing in renewables and we don't feel the good solutions that renewables can offer to us? Because they are paying very, very, very skyrocketing bills. So let me be clear, we have to reform this market. But in order to give a balance and protecting the investment in renewables, but also giving good signals to consumers and citizenship, because we have to engage also all the people, all the citizenship in this Green Deal, in this process. We are fighting the climate emergency that is a structural emergency, and now we are facing this war that are killing us when it comes to companies, industries, but also households. And how to get solutions in the short term, medium, and long. Let me be clear, we have to invest in renewables. Renewables are the best solution, not only now, because if we had had more renewables, probably we were not facing these problems what we are facing right now, because the invasion, we will be less dependent on Russian gas, for sure, but how to speed up renewables. And now is the issue, I am the shadow rapporteur for the Renewable Energy Directive in the Parliament. We have approved in the last plenary our position, that is a 45% target of renewable energy by 2030. But now we have to think how to get this target, how to reach this target. And we are entering now in other negotiations that is called the RED 4, previously was the RED 3, and we are dealing with the public acceptance and permitting process. And let me be clear, we have to accelerate and speed up the administrative procedures, but taking into account that we have some problems in almost every country in Europe when it comes to the people that are suffering this big deployment on renewables. So the problem is how to engage these people, how to engage local communities in order to speed up this transition, in order to speed up the investments, how to find figures, how to find the real wording in the legislation, in this directive, to give a signal to the investors that they can rely on European rules to put more money in renewables, but also given to the public opinion that we are going to take them into account when it comes to this big and massive deployment that we're going to need. Let me be clear. For example, in my region, in Spain, northwest of Spain, that is Galicia, we have more than 150 projects right now in administrative procedures that could take longer than 3 or 4 years. And this is a problem. And I think this is a shared problem with other regions and member states of Europe. So let me be clear also. Everybody wants to be in heaven, but nobody wants to die. So yes, we want, all of us, we want more renewables, more clean electricity, more sustainable electricity, but nobody wants this clean electricity close to their homes. So how to engage the people, how to benefit the local communities with this new production of renewable sources, how to say to the fishermen that we are going to build a lot of offshore wind production, and they won't have problems with this. How to compensate these fishermen is also a problem that we have to solve, because we cannot go for this massive deployment without them, without engage the people. Let me also make one comment. Yes, we have this outcome in the recent Italian elections. Populism is getting bigger in Europe. I think that it's a good feel. These people in the populated areas, disappointed with the massive production and deployment of renewables, could be also a field to harvest this populism. So I think this is a big challenge that we are facing now, dealing with this second part of the Renewable Directive that we are dealing right now in the Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. There's certainly a common theme of permitting, but I think also of engaging with citizens. Recently, in my own country of Ireland, we had an accord signed between fishers and the wind industry. So I think dialogue is important. Bringing both sides together is so important, and engaging citizens at this challenging time. Kim, from your perspective, I'd be interested in your own thoughts as a member of the Belgian Parliament. Where do you see things at the moment?
Yeah, thank you all for having me. I must say I am a bit nervous for being here, not because I need to talk English, but because this is something that tackles me every day when I talk to my neighbor, when I talk to my grandmother, when I talk to my mother who has difficulties paying bills. But someone told me that I just need to talk from my heart, and I'm going to do that. Because I think it's important that we tell people that we as politicians hear them, and that we want to listen to them, and that we are trying to find solutions. But it's not easy. Now, I heard a lot of things, and I wrote down a lot of things, but I'm going to try to make some structure in what I'm going to tell you, because I think, as a member of a Green Party, that from the moment we started, that we told the same thing. Namely, if we want to tackle climate crisis, that is also going to be good for crises like we have today when you take a look at energy prices. And that's what every single member here already told you. It's important to invest in renewables, in renewable energy. And I think it's important to take a look at what Europe can do. Cooperation is important. And I heard a lot of nice things today as what Europe can do. We've got a federal minister of energy, Minister van der Straten, who also has got good contacts on the European level, and it's really important, I think, to keep talking to one another and to take a look at what we can do as a European Union. For example, a price cap on gas, I think it's important. But I want to focus on what we did in Belgium, because I think that we already know what European Union has done up to now. Our federal minister, Minister van der Straten, took up the challenge to go to 100% renewable energy. And she did that with a few ideas, and she worked out those ideas. The first thing she wanted to focus on is offshore wind. And again, there she cooperates with others. There was the North Sea Summit in Denmark. I'm not going to pronounce the Danish port city because that's it. But there they agreed that the North Sea needs to become a major source of renewable energy. And how are we going to do that together with Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany, Belgium? It's building a hybrid energy island on the North Sea and make interconnections with every single other country along that North Sea. So by doing that, we want to quadruple offshore wind up to 65 gigawatts by 2030 and up to 150 gigawatts up to 2050. Another thing, and I already heard people talking about that, also something we want to focus on in Belgium is hydrogen. Not as a kind of wonder formula. I think it's really important that we think in what kind of applications hydrogen, green hydrogen, can be a solution. And for example, when I take a look at Belgium, you've got heavy industry. Heavy industry or takes up for 30% of the CO2 emissions. So that is one of the applications that can benefit from a switch to green hydrogen. Other things are shipping and heavy transport on long distances. But we think it's really important to do that in the applications where electrification is not a solution. So it's not a wonder formula, but we can use it in certain applications. Now, important for Belgium is that we've got limited land area that we need for our solar projects and our wind on land projects. So we want to focus on the importation of green hydrogen. Again, we've got a minister, a federal minister, that works to have diversified partnerships when it comes to that. Another thing we want to focus on, and it's something that wasn't mentioned yet, I think, is energy storage systems. It's really important if we invest in renewables, that we also think of how we can store the energy or the electricity that was produced, because indeed there isn't always sun and there isn't always wind. But there is technology that can help us with doing that. Something else, because I want to make it not too long, but I want to say a lot of things. Something else I think is important is that we have a very good national plan for recovery and resilience. We got a positive opinion of the European Commission on that because it had a lot of measurements that speed up the green transition in Belgium. And then we take a look at renovation of both public buildings and private buildings, but also, and I heard other members of the panel talk about that earlier, green mobility. We really want to invest in electric buses, but also trains that are accessible for everyone, or charging stations for bicycles. Those are also things that we think are important. And then before I go to the prices, because I think that also needs some attention, one thing that I think is important is indeed we need to get public or citizens to agree with what we are doing, so dialogue is important. But what's also something that we can do is green cooperatives. And one of the things that, for example, our minister wants to do in the next tender for offshore wind is to take part or to make sure that participation can be done by citizens. Because we think that there is also a solution in doing that. The biggest cooperative, EuroPower, for example, in Belgium, now has a stop on their contracts because people want to take part in that green transition. One more thing, when it comes to prices, I think it's important to know that we hear people that we want to do things on the European level, but also on the Belgian level. One of the things we think is important is that the most vulnerables are protected. And that is why we integrated the social fund. 1 in 5 families are protected against high energy prices. And that is also something I think we can be proud of when I take a look at how we cover things in Belgium.
Thank you, Kim. And thank you for bringing the issue of transport and mobility into the frame. I think we focus on energy, we focus on buildings. I certainly do. But I think transport and mobility, and of course agriculture, are crucial in tackling climate change. But I think there's a lot that can be done in terms of transport. I do want to come back to everyone on the panel for a final word or reflection, but I'm conscious we have the Slido tool. So if we can bring up Slido on screen. And the question there should be clear. Why are member states not able to shorten permitting procedures for RES projects faster? And we have, I think, 4 different questions there. And I think you can just scan the barcode to get straight in there, or you can go on to slido.com using that hashtag, European Union Sustainable Energy Week 2022. And I'll leave the questions up there, but I think while you're thinking about those questions, I might come back to the panel for a final comment, because we just have a few minutes left. I'm very conscious that we have two Danes on the panel today, and in her State of the Union address just within the last few weeks, Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, talked about the energy crisis in the 1970s and 1980, and said, you know, many countries had to tackle that crisis, and some realized that the shift to renewables was hugely important. And Denmark was one of those countries that realized that investment in renewables was a crucial part of the future 40, 50 years ago. So I think that has given the people of Denmark an insight into how to tackle a crisis and how to think long term. But maybe Niels, from yourself, have you any thoughts on listening to the other panelists, or any suggestions for how we move forward in the year ahead?
Well, I'm just happy that I agree here with the last speaker, that it seems that everyone agrees that renewables and energy efficiency is the way forward. We represent different political groups here, but that seems to be, we seem to agree on that. I think that some of the questions here, they touch upon infrastructure, and I think that is maybe something we have not discussed so much, but we cannot do this transition without better energy infrastructure when it comes to grids, when it comes to interconnectors. We touched upon it. And I think because we need the flexibility when the wind blows in Denmark, and the sun shines in Spain, but not always. So we need to be able to sell and buy energy from each other. And I think that's what we need to invest in. I think just final remark: the 1970s crisis, that really, what you referred to, Kieran, that really sparked an enormous transition in Denmark. Back then, we were 90% dependent on imported oil, so we were hit extremely hard by the oil crisis, and that made us do those two things: invest in renewables. We have a lot of wind turbines in Denmark, and invest in energy efficiency, district heating, combined power and heating plants, and so on. And I think we can use that model also for Europe today.
Thank you. Thank you. I remember 1983 as a teenager. I flew into Denmark, and I remember coming down to the runway and seeing wind turbines and going, wow, this is the future. But that's 39 years ago, and I guess it shows that sometimes we have the right ideas, but it takes time to buy into them around Europe. Hans, some reflections from yourself.
Thank you, Kieran. I think, to be very brief, we don't have a lot of time here. I think there's been a lot of very interesting thought on this panel. I think, as Niels just said, there seems to be a general train of thought that the long-term solutions come from renewables and energy efficiency. I think, though, we should not forget that in the immediate term, and many politicians, especially national politicians, they are extremely worried about the upcoming winter, and we need to not forget that, and we need some measures, and that's what we're also in the Commission concentrating on right now. Some of these measures will be temporary by nature, and I think we need to look then after that, and I think Ursula von der Leyen has said that very clearly, we need to have a look at overall market design. Are we in the right place when it comes to, shall we say, securing our energy structures, our energy markets for the future, with much larger shares of renewables in particular? And that, I think, is a discussion that we will have to take when that comes. But for now, we're looking at a winter that is going to be difficult. Energy efficiency will help us get through the winter. That's why we've come forward with the both Save Gas for a Safe Winter, and also the electricity peak shaving, which is being discussed this week. So that will help us, but it's going to be tough. And I think we need to see what that brings, and we need to make sure that we do not lose focus on the longer perspective, the trilogues that are coming up, yours, Niels's, so to say, on the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Buildings Directive, but also the Renewables Directive, and the rest of the Fit for 55 package, because that whole package is critically important. So that's perhaps all I wanted to say at this late stage.
I'm conscious of the clock, so I might just give one sentence to each of the panelists, starting Nicholas at the far end with you.
Regarding the last I welcome all these things from the Commission, all these measures, all the temporary measures, but we have lost 1 year. We have to remember that. Right now, perfect. Let me mention regarding these last comments that we have lost 1 year in all these temporary measures. We could introduce some of these measures previously. From my side, from the side of my country and my group, we have asked previously for all these things. So for the reform of the electricity market, how the market is not functioning very well. We have to move fast. Okay, but we be conscious of that
Absolutely.
we lost 1 year.
Yeah, so we need to speed up. Maria, a final sentence.
I would like to leave the message that was already said here. Investment is important, and not forget the whole sectors in the society, not only the energy production, but the industry, the transport, agriculture. We need a lot of work to do in all these sectors. Thank you. And I have to leave you. I'm catching a flight. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Maria. Christina, investment, that's music to your ears.
That's true. And in terms of permitting, I want to give you a very good example. So in Romania, if you want to become a prosumer at household level, you don't need any permit from the local authority, but you need the permitting if you want to have a big RES project. I would say it's not only the permitting, it's also the lack of legislative predictability, because we are changing a lot, so investors are not really happy with that. Another message, and very short, I promise you, we should look at the European economy and stop being a vulnerable commercial partner in terms of supply chains for renewables and all that, because otherwise we'll get into other problems.
Very good. Kim.
Yeah, it's too bad that we can't answer the questions. I'm just going to give you one sentence. The European Union was created through cooperation around coal and steel. Our partnership can intensify by working together around solar, wind, and water.
Thank you for bringing it together so succinctly. We saw some of the questions that were upvoted there on Slido. I'm afraid time has caught up with us. We simply cannot devote the time to that. But I think, in conclusion, a couple of themes came through. There is not just one elephant in the room, there are several. Gas is one of them, Christina, that you mentioned. Nuclear, we tiptoed, I think, a little bit around that. But I think for most of us, there's a feeling that if there's a nuclear plant there, keep it on, certainly to get through the energy crisis. But I think more importantly, there's huge support for bringing renewables on as quickly as we can, and bringing all those other measures that can control the supply and the use of energy, particularly throughout the winter months ahead and over the next few years. And I think the last takeaway for me, in all of this, the consumer must be protected. And I think the measures that we adopt to protect the consumer, they need to be forensic, they need to be targeted, and they need to protect the most vulnerable in society. Can I thank my panel of extraordinary parliamentarians and those from the Commission? Can I thank you, the audience, for your time and interest in this subject today. There's many more events coming up throughout Sustainable Energy Week. On behalf of myself as President of Euphores, to thank Jan Geiss, our Director General, to thank everybody who's worked behind the scenes to make this possible. Good luck in the days and years ahead as we make the transition a reality. Thank you.